The meeting had been arranged entirely by Gao Tu's father. Shen Wenlang had agreed to come without fully knowing what he was walking into, guided only by the vague urgency in the man's call. The restaurant was quiet, its muted atmosphere a sharp contrast to the tension simmering at the table. Gao Tu's father sat opposite Wenling, a practiced calm masking the greed in his eyes. He had always been selfish, a gambling addict who never considered the well-being of his children. But now he carried an audacity that shocked even those familiar with his manipulative ways. His fingers drummed impatiently against the table, a thin smile plastered across his face. And then he began, without preamble, to reveal the news that Wenling would never have expected to hear. "My son is pregnant," Gao Tu's father said bluntly, his tone almost casual, as if discussing a trivial matter rather than a revelation that would shake lives. Wenling blinked, momentarily stunned, his mind attempting to process the words even as the weight of their implications pressed down on him. The older man leaned back slightly, his gaze unwavering, and continued, "But it doesn't have to be a problem. If you pay us 10 million, we'll have the pregnancy ended." The words fell into the room like a heavy stone, startling in their brazenness. There was no negotiation, no room for discussion. It was stated as a fact, an offer, and a threat all at once. Gao Tu's father had always valued money above all else, exploiting every situation for his gain, and now he used the most personal and devastating news as leverage. He knew Wenling's stance on omegas and children, he knew exactly what he was doing, and he wielded that knowledge like a weapon. At the very moment the words left Gao Tu's father's mouth, Gao Tu felt an unbearable surge of fear and protectiveness. He had known this meeting was being organized, but he had never expected his father to reveal something so personal and coercive. Trembling from head to toe, Gao Tu stood abruptly, murmuring an excuse about going to the bathroom, his voice tight and fragile. He barely waited for a response before slipping away, the growing panic propelling him out of the restaurant and into the streets beyond. Every step was a desperate flight from the reality that his child, the life growing within him, could be threatened, and he could not allow that. Gao Tu ran not just from the immediate situation, but from the thought of what might come if Wenling agreed to his father's demand. If 10 million could dictate the fate of his unborn child. In that moment, all that mattered was the safety of his child, and he vanished into the anonymity of the city. Every heartbeat a mix of fear, resolve, and determination to protect the life he carried. Meanwhile, Wenling remained at the table, frozen in disbelief, staring at Gao Tu's father as the words sank in. There was no conversation with Gao Tu, no confrontation, no explanation, just the cold, raw proposition, the threat wrapped in greed, and the knowledge that Gao Tu had excused himself and disappeared. The silence that followed was heavy, oppressive, leaving Wenling to grapple with the reality of the situation alone, to process that Gao Tu was carrying his child, and that Gao Tu's father had just tried to turn it into a transaction. It was shocking, infuriating, and terrifying all at once. The power in the room had shifted entirely. Gao Tu's father held a cruel advantage, using his son's secret and Wenling's principles as a means to manipulate, while Gao Tu himself had vanished, leaving both the father and the potential parent to face the implications of his absence. Gao Tu's escape was swift and deliberate, his mind consumed by the singular need to ensure the safety of the life growing inside him. He ran without looking back, not knowing where he would go, only that he had to remove himself from the reach of both his father and the threat hanging over his child. The streets became a blur around him, the noise of the city fading as he focused entirely on putting distance between the danger of the present and the fragile life he carried. Each breath burned, each step shook his body, but he refused to slow down. In his heart, he had made a decision he could not reverse. He would protect this child at all costs, and no force, no money, no manipulation, no threat could make him abandon the life that had already become the center of his existence. Back in the restaurant, the table was left silent, a void lingering where Gao Tu had been only moments before. Wenling's eyes remained fixed on the empty space, absorbing the gravity of the situation, realizing fully for the first time the depth of the crisis they now faced. The air hung thick with tension, with the cruel certainty of Gao Tu's father's selfishness and greed. and the sudden, unnerving absence of Gao Tu. In that moment, the meeting had ended in chaos, leaving Wenling to face the stark reality alone. His child existed, his Omega loved and vanished, and Gao Tu's father had made it clear that he would exploit both for his own gain. The sense of helplessness was suffocating, but it was also a turning point, the first step toward choices that would forever change the lives of everyone involved. Gao Tu ran away not because he wanted to escape responsibility, but because he had to protect the life growing inside him. The moment his father mentioned money and the abortion, fear gripped him. He excused himself from the meeting, saying he was going to the bathroom, but instead he ran. Every step away from the restaurant, every turn down a quiet street, every shadow he passed became part of his plan to disappear. He needed time, space, and safety. For years, he had hidden his true self from the world, using suppressants to hide that he was an Omega, pretending to be the calm and reliable beta that everyone expected him to be. He had been careful for his entire life, but this was different. Now it was not about appearances. Now, it was about survival, about protecting the child he carried, about making sure no one, not even his own father, could hurt the life he had chosen to protect. The city around him felt overwhelming. Cars rushed past, lights flashed, and people walked unaware of the small, urgent drama unfolding just steps away. Gao Tu's heartbeat raced as he ducked into alleys and quieter streets. His bag clutched tightly over his shoulder, his mind running faster than his feet. He thought about the child, small and vulnerable, relying entirely on him. Every flutter he remembered from the last moments before the meeting reminded him why he could not hesitate. He could not trust his father, who had always been selfish and absent, treating Gao Tu as a source of money or a pawn to serve his own gambling habits and selfish desires. No, this time, Gao Tu was in control, and he would protect what was his responsibility, what he loved more than anything. After hours of moving through the city, Gao Tu found a small, empty apartment in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't fancy, but it was private, and that was all that mattered. He locked the door behind him and leaned against it, finally allowing himself a moment to breathe. Sitting on the edge of the bed, he pressed his hand to his stomach and felt the faint movements of the child inside him. Those tiny flutters brought both comfort and urgency. He whispered softly, "I'll protect you. I promise I'll keep you safe." The child's life had suddenly become his most important priority, even more important than his own safety or comfort. The pain in his body, the exhaustion from running, and the fear that had driven him here faded slightly in the warmth of that tiny reassurance. Gao Tu had to adjust quickly to this new life. Every action required planning. Even moving across the small apartment caused pain, and every day was a challenge. Eating became a careful exercise in balance. Rest was constantly interrupted by discomfort, and simple movements like bending or stretching required attention. But he had no choice. Every day, every careful action was a way to protect the child. He refused to falter. He could feel his body protesting after years of suppressants and the stress of pregnancy, but he knew that the pain was a small price to pay for the safety of the child. Meanwhile, Shen Wenlang sat at the restaurant after the meeting, his mind racing. Gao Tu wasn't there. His father had revealed the pregnancy, tried to manipulate the situation, and left Wenling with questions and confusion. Wenling felt a mix of emotions: frustration, worry, and a strange longing he could not explain. He knew his father had a way of controlling situations, but he also understood that Gao Tu was clever, resourceful, and careful. Gao Tu would not be easily swayed or caught off guard. Wenling's mind tried to piece together what must have happened after Gao Tu excused himself. He imagined Gao Tu running through the streets, making sure he and the child were safe. Even without seeing him, he could picture the determination and careful planning that Gao Tu was capable of. Gao Tu spent the first night in the apartment quietly, listening to the sounds of the city outside. Car horns, distant sirens, footsteps on the streets all reminded him of the world beyond his small sanctuary. He had to balance fear and focus, staying alert but not letting panic take over. He whispered to the child repeatedly, reassuring both himself and the tiny life he carried. "You are safe now. No one can hurt you." I will protect you, he said, feeling the tiny movements of the child in response. Every flutter, every sign of life strengthened his resolve. He was alone, but he was not defeated.